So your students, does your social media presence or persona, does that spill over into the class? Like, do they ever watch any of your content and
I don't
maybe?
know. I don't. I gotta figure. One of my colleagues once said, one of the students said, "Can't the chemistry department come out and make a statement about my Twitter feed?" And my colleague said, "What would we say? I mean, what do you want? Right? We
So,
all have opinions." So he handled it well.
yeah, I
But
mean,
we're in an era now where I had a funny thing happen this week actually, where one of my colleagues over in the art squad, a guy I've never met, who generated massive headlines on the Hamas thing, where he expressed exhilaration
mhm.
over the killing in Israel. And you could go all down all sorts of paths supporting various sides and various reasons, but to talk about the exhilaration of a mass killing, that didn't work for pretty much anybody. And the president denounced him. And I have problems with the president saying that these are not Cornell's values, because she can't speak for Cornell. She can speak for herself. She can bring the gravitas of being the president. But I'm Cornell, my colleagues are Cornell, the students are Cornell. She can't see these are Cornell values. And I've actually talked to a couple of trustees about it. And one of them said, I'm going to talk to her about that actually.
Mhm.
Um, and then she said in a recent article this week, she said, only twice have I ever criticized the speech of a faculty member. This is only the second time. The first time
Mhm.
was me. First time was me.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it was something I was right about. She was wrong.
Mhm.
It turns out I defended the police. They knocked over that guy in Buffalo. He was a grifter. He'd been a pain in their ass. He was skimming their electronic equipment. He faked being injured. The whole thing was nuts. And I didn't say anything particularly unusual. I said that it was odd that he was there and why was he poking him, and it's kind of self-inflicted.
Mhm.
That's not, I didn't say he deserved to die or anything. There was just nothing like that. And somehow the students got upset. I think it was an astroturfed cancellation. But to stop it, she and four others signed a letter declaring that what I said didn't represent Cornell values. And when I wrote about it and I explained the whole thing, I got to the end. I said, "Are you sure I don't represent Cornell's values?" Because I just laid out what the truth is,
Mhm.
as opposed to the crap that they were believing. So she's done that several times. So running a campus right now is very, very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
I just can't fathom what it would be like. I have the provost is a friend of mine. So when
Mhm.
I battled the unions twice, one of the battles was at the request of the dean of faculty, and the other was at the request of the provost.
Mhm.
Phone call late at night, Dave, you need to mount the counterattack. So I did. I paid a very dear price. A lot of smear campaigns and stuff. Um, he even signed that letter denouncing me, but I don't think he believed it. Um, I was going to send him an email and say, Mike, you have my condolences. This has been a tough week. But I realized that he's probably received a 500,000 emails.
Yeah, the whole, like from when I went to college, and I went to a smaller college, but it just seems the landscape, whether freedom of speech, the tribalism, the
Hmm.
the the protests. You've been teaching what, almost 30 years
43,
all at Cornell?
all at Cornell.
Wow. So you've
And I was an
seen,
undergrad there, so 47. So I've seen Cornell from the student's perspective too.
wow. So Gen Z, Gen X, all these different, do what is the current landscape, like the current students? Is there any similarities to the previous generations?
No, no. The best way to understand what happened is to read Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff's book, Coddling the American Mind. There's actually, if you want to save yourself the time,
Mhm.
there's a documentary now being made, a movie,
Mhm.
in which I don't know how they're going to do it, but there's going to be about those two. And what they said was that they were chatting one day, and they both somehow independently drew the conclusion that the kids coming to Haidt was at NYU at that point, as was Lukianoff, that the students in the class of 2004, the freshmen entering class in 2014, were different,
Yeah.
just strikingly different. And so they started chatting about it, and then they wrote a book.
Hmm.
And it's about sort of the entitlement and the victimhood and the trigger warnings and all that crap. And and in some level, you can't blame the students because we raised them, right? They didn't raise themselves, and
Just like our
so
politicians, right? I mean,
well, except we don't control that. At least I'm not taking credit for our politicians because that's a crime syndicate running that operation. But so the theory is that 2014 freshman class were the first to have gone through some formative period in their life, maybe the early teens, with iPhones, with
yeah.
with real access to social media, and that all of a sudden there was this big change. And ever since then, it's pretty whacked. What I've noticed about the students, and I've told the classes, this isn't news, they study very differently. And I noticed it last year
They
actually, where
study differently.
yeah,
I was a crammer. I was a crammer. I night before the test, I would just cram. What do you what do you mean they study
well,
different?
at Cornell you flunk out doing that, so
I wouldn't have made it in Cornell. Yeah.
right. And so when I was an undergrad, I was
Hmm.
terrified because I wasn't a great student in high school, and you can say how'd I get into Cornell? That's a separate story altogether.
Hmm.
But I studied every day. I went to the library at 9, went to class, came home for dinner, went back up, came back
Yeah.
at 11, spent a little time goofing off, then went to bed and repeated. And that was 7 days a week.
So I guess the current students, they're not studying like that, or
Well, read an article one day about University of Texas. I think it was at Arlington. Could be wrong in that, but one of the Texas schools where they had online reading assignments, and because it was online, they could tell when the kids were reading. So the reading assignments would be up on the screen, but that doesn't mean they're reading. But an algorithm that's trivially written could actually ascertain that they're reading because it's scrolling or whatever, right? Um, and their conclusion was, and I don't know if this is per course per semester or per
Mhm.
semester total, it doesn't really matter. Their conclusion was that kids were reading 162 minutes a semester. Now, there's no reason for that college to exist, right? There's none whatsoever.